Welcome, and thank you for attending our first webinar about starting and maintaining a vegetable garden. This webinar is brought to you by Anoka County Master Gardeners. I am Tamara Boyce, a volunteer Master Gardener intern. We have scheduled time at the end of the webinar to answer any questions you may have. You can type your questions into the chat or wait until the presentation is finished to ask them directly, and our Master Gardeners will be happy to answer your questions. Please mute your audio during the presentation. Now I'm going to turn you over to our speaker, Terry Powell, and I'm going to share.
Hi, everyone. My name is Terry. I'm a Master Gardener intern also with Anoka County, along with Tamara. And I want to welcome you all to our first in the webinar series entitled, So You Want to Grow Vegetables. We're really excited to have you, and we hope we can entice you to start your own vegetable garden this coming spring. In this following webinar, we're going to go through 13, 14 slides, and I probably won't read every slide as we go along, but there's one of them ahead that I do want to. However, we want to let you know that this webinar series is geared for you folks who have never had a vegetable garden, or you've maybe had done it once or twice and had limited success. But we're hoping to entice you to start your own vegetables this coming spring. With each slide, like I said, I won't read them all, but the next one I do want to read to you. Because this slide tells you who we are and what our philosophy is. The University of Minnesota Extension Master Gardener Volunteer Program uses research-based horticultural knowledge and practices to deliver educational outreach and project-based efforts that inspire change and promote healthy people, healthy communities, and a healthy planet. So let's get started. First of all, as I said, we're planning this so for those folks who haven't ever had a vegetable garden, there will be more sessions to follow that will talk about selecting, planting, managing the garden, those kinds of things, as well as other types of gardening, such as container gardening, straw bale gardening, and raised bed gardening. Let's get started with the next one. The tools you're going to need, very simple. One is a pencil and paper. What I've used in the past is like a spiral ring notebook or a steno notepad, because for me, I've used that notepad to help me decide what I wanted to plant next year, rotating crops, what worked, what didn't, those kinds of things, keeping my own notes, so to speak. The other thing, tape measure to measure out your plot, a shovel or spading fork for preparing the ground. We'll get to that in a minute, as well as cardboard and leaves. We'll also get to that in a future one. That has to do with a raised bed. Our next slide, we decided there's a whole group of us who made this webinar series. And a lot of the other Master Gardeners are more experienced than Tamara and I. We all thought of an idea of the easy to grow vegetables. Things that you might have a better success with, easier. Myself, my favorite, I have to admit, are those bush beans. If I keep them going throughout the summer, I can give some to neighbors, canning some, those kinds of things. Peas, onions, carrots, peppers are easy, broccoli's easy, those kinds of things like that. The next one tells us about some of those that are the harder to grow vegetables. I've tried cabbage. It does have these little green worms. Strawberries, as it says, prone to mildew. Some of the ones on the right side, the cucumbers and pumpkin squash, the gourd type plants, they need a trellis, they need a lot of room. They could grow up a fence, but it just takes a lot more effort. And corn, oh my gosh, let me tell you, I've tried to grow corn, and a couple of times the squirrels got it, a couple of times the raccoons got it. I just gave up, and I now just go to my local, farmer's market. That's the better thing that I'm going to do from now on with corn. So those are a few harder, easier ones. There's two major things. One is sunlight, and here it tells you minimum of 6 hours, optimum of 8 hours. Things to consider: trees, shade, the shade from your house, the shade from the neighbor's house, sheds, those kinds of things. So as you look around your yard to prepare or plan where you're going to put it, walk around it maybe in the morning, again in the afternoon, to look at where the sunnier spots in your yard are. The next slide that we have here deals with choosing the site. We suggest to start small because gardens can be a lot of work, can be some maintenance, weeding, those kinds of things that we'll get to in future webinars. But we suggest starting small. And we will come later on with the idea that if you rent or can't dig in your yard or have an apartment, those issues like we mentioned here, raised beds, straw bale gardening, and container gardening. We'll get to that in a future series. But consider even the sides of your house. I have things, or I have had, on my driveway or right in my front door. So consider places that, are not necessarily common for a vegetable garden, but it's easy if you can start small. You can always change it. Our next one is getting water. Oh my goodness, getting water to your garden. Rainfall usually just doesn't do it. And I can tell you from experience myself that in the middle of summer, when it's 90, 95 degrees, maybe I've worked all day, I do not want to be carrying 5-gallon water buckets out to the garden. The Master Gardener program suggests, as it shows here in this picture, what they refer to as soaker hoses with a quick disconnect. They get the water right to the roots of the plant, most efficient for water, less waste of water. I will tell you myself, however, I made the mistake before I even joined the Master Gardeners. I'd never heard of soaker hoses, and I put in a sprinkler system. Yes, above ground sprinkler systems can do work as well, or not as well, but and the reason why is that the above ground sprinkler system, just like rain, brings it brings down the plants, and when the rain hits the sprinkler system hits the ground, some of the minerals and chemicals will come up onto the lower leaves of your plants and tend to wilt those lower leaves and can cause some funguses too. So these soaker hoses, if you can do it, are the best way to get water to your garden. All right. Our next slide is to absolutely make sure the soil is good in your area. Believe it or not, Anoka County, where we live, is very sandy, but that's great for a good garden. It allows for a lot of drainage. As it says here, the gold standard is to get a comprehensive soil test, which I'll mention in a minute. But if you're starting small, you at least want to get some compost or an all-purpose balanced fertilizer. You can go to your garden center or a hardware store that has a garden center and ask the folks for just this all-purpose fertilizer. And Anoka County has an excellent, and probably your county as well, if you're watching from another county, have a great compost site. Ours here, you can get compost by the yard if you have like a truck or trailer. But they also are really nice. They bag some of the compost into like 20-pound bags and have been very helpful to load some compost in the back of my van. So you will want to add some compost to your soil before you start planting. Our next slide deals with getting that soil test. I'm going to leave this slide up for a minute so that you can either screenshot it or write down the instructions to get a comprehensive soil test. The University of Minnesota provides this soil test at a very modest fee. Right now, even less than $20. May go up in the future with inflation, we all know. And you think to yourself, how do I even do a soil test? These websites will even show you how to gather a soil test, submit it to the University of Minnesota. And then when you get the results back, they even tell you, they explain it to you and tell you what to add, what nutrients to add to your garden before you start. So it's great to have that if you can. That would be a super idea. Next, oh boy, those critters, they're gonna come. As the saying goes, build it and they will come. I've had the worst and the best with the critters in my yard. I have to admit, I made the mistake also. I put a chain link fence for my dogs in the back. The chain link fences are 3 to 4 feet. However, I live along Coon Creek. So I even woke up a couple of days ago to 4 deer grazing on my shrubs in the backyard. And in the spring, summer, they're going to graze, if they can, on your vegetables if you have deer in your area. And so what I did was, the best idea is to get the 6 to 8 foot fence. Because I didn't have one, what I did was to get 8-foot poles, put them at the corners of my garden and in the middle, a couple of places, and then string a wire around the top so that they would come up, butt up against it, and then walk off. They weren't interested. But the worst, even worse than the deer, are the rabbits or the small ground animals, voles and so forth. They will kind of burrow under a fence if the fence is not a little bit buried, an inch or two, maybe. You can get chicken wire or those decorative mesh fences, but they're not really as strong, they're not really sturdy, and don't last as long. So it's better to get what they refer to at the hardware store, like a rabbit fence, okay? And you really want to make sure to keep your dogs and cats out. I have 2 dogs, but for health reasons, you want to keep your pets out of the garden. Our next slide deals with preparing the ground. As it says here, you want to mark out your plot. We suggest 4-foot width because that allows for the different rows that you're going to be, rows of plants that you're going to be planting as you choose 2 to 3, 4 vegetables, okay? And when you do this with the shovel, with a traditional in-ground garden, you're going to use a shovel or spade fork, cut it in those dimensions that you have mapped off, and remove the sod. It shows here in this picture the no-till or raised bed, and what we refer to as the lasagna method, where you put a layer of cardboard. We suggest corrugated, plain brown, no pictures, no painting, on the cardboard, but a regular brown cardboard, and then put organic matter or leaves on top of that, and then another layer of cardboard. When you do that, or if you use the raised bed method, make sure that you water each layer very thoroughly as you go along. And then when you have those 3, 4 layers, put a rock or some sort of weight on top to keep it down. Then when you start later with your raised bed, you will just add your soil on top of that raised bed. But when you're doing that, make sure that you keep in mind the edging. You want to make sure that you have edging between the lawn and the garden, and that will actually also help keep your fence. It'll help ground your fence too, and keep those critters from burrowing under, as we mentioned before. Our next slide shows you the other webinars that we're going to be presenting to you in the near future. We hope that you have gotten just a taste of how to start or plan and be thinking of a vegetable garden this spring. These other webinars will talk about like I mentioned, the special planting, the straw bale, raised beds, and container gardens, because we, believe it or not, even if you don't have your own home, don't have a yard, there's ways to do the container gardening or the straw bale or raised beds. And we want to also help you in the future with recognizing and thinning the vegetables and preparing the bed. With this last slide, again, I want to keep this up for a few minutes so that you have a chance to screenshot it or write down. These are excellent, excellent resources from our Master Gardener program and the University of Minnesota Extension Office that will help you with a multitude of questions, not just about vegetable gardens, but about other issues, shrubs, trees, many, many things. It's just a wonderful list or websites that you can go to. We want to thank you this evening for joining us. We hope you'll stay tuned, because I'm hoping that there are a few questions in the chat that people can answer, as well as the other Master Gardeners that have worked with us, because there's been a whole team of us working on this webinar series. We want to thank you all, but they can help me and help us answer these questions and maybe a few things that, I may have missed along the way. So we hope that you're excited. When I get my catalogs, I've already started getting them, and I've already picked out some vegetables. It gets me excited to have my vegetable garden this spring, and we hope that you're excited and that we can help you in any way we can. Our phone number is there. You can ask a Master Gardener at any time. Thank you very much for joining us.
All right, you guys, now we're gonna go move on to questions. And I'm also going to put some of those resources in the chat for you if you would like to copy and paste them or take them with you. All right, so, okay, chat, nothing in chat. All right, I'm going to, let me see. Okay, feel free to unmute if you would like to ask a question of our Master Gardeners, or put a question in the chat.
I'll ask a question. How soon is too soon to start planting?
Okay, I'm going to open that up to our Master Gardeners to have them give you their expertise.
Well,
right.
I know I myself have started things in the house as early as March, usually more in April. And you can also plant some things in a sunny area outside in April if you're doing it from seed. But then you would need to bring it in, usually in the winter, or in the evening, excuse me, because it still freezes at that time. When I start to plant my seeds in the ground, it's probably Memorial weekend. I don't know. Other Master Gardeners, can you answer that?
So I suppose for me, it depends on A, how warm the soil is, and B, what I'm planting, because some fruit vegetables will germinate at cooler temperatures, and others require warmer temperatures to germinate.
I know we have some questions, so let me see. What is a well-balanced fertilizer? And I'm going to leave that to the master gardeners to answer.
Come on, Sue Peterson, you can answer that one for us.
Back to what you were saying as far as the planting timing, I always look at planting it in 2 different successions. I use my root vegetables first because a lot of those need cool weather in order to germinate. So I will do one planting session with my beets, my corn, not corn, but my beets, my carrots, my radishes, my onions. Now wait a couple weeks later, and then I will plant my warm weather vegetables a lot later. So it warms up. As far as fertilizer, I use compost and I dig that into the soil each year. Sometimes I use Osmocote.
Oh.
What is that?
Osmocote.
Osmocote.
Osmocote, OSMECOTE, is a fertilizer that is a granular and it releases its nitrogen, potash, and potassium into the soil as it's warranted. I do it on Memorial Day, 4th of July, and Labor Day. It's a 4-month fertilizer.
Wow. Okay.
Oh, that's
So-
super.
But a well-balanced fertilizer is a fertilizer that is relatively balanced between the 3 elements. So it promotes not only the green leafy growth, it promotes the stem growth and the fruiting of the vegetables. If you use a fertilizer that's too high in nitrogen, you're going to get lots of lovely leaves and not much else.
Okay. Thank you. Does anyone else have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. I've used soaker hoses in the past and I have not had very good success with them. I'm just wondering, do people like half bury them in the ground and cover them up, or lay them right on top? The problem I've had with the porous type soaker hoses is that, if you kink them, then you get a big hole and all your water comes out there. And,
So I've been using soaker hoses for a long time. And what I have finally concluded is none are perfect. The recycled rubber ones will maybe last a season if you put them down carefully and leave them in place. The nylon ones seem to work the best. But soaker hoses, in my opinion, are meant to be left in place once you lay them. In other words, you don't move them from garden to garden weekly or whatever, because they just don't stand up well. I also have found I use them in my straw bale gardens, and I just stake them down to the garden so that they don't twist and kink on their own as the water pressure changes. So I use wire stakes, like the landscape type stakes, to hold them in place right at the base of the plant. So I actually put the seedlings or the rows in first, and then put the hose down alongside of it and stake it in place.
Now, what we've done in our main part of our garden is we've used drip irrigation
Right.
system.
And yeah. That was supposed to be my project for my grapefruit trees this winter down in Texas, was to replace the soaker hoses with actual drip irrigation. As you can see, I'm in Minnesota. So that'll wait.
And
But,
I really like the drip irrigation. I think it works really well.
Do you use a timer with it?
I'm the timer.
Oh, all right.
So that's a good idea, though.
That's the other thing is I found on the internet, but not on Amazon, on an actual garden site, a 4-port timer for the back faucet. And so all the pots have drip irrigation going into them, the little brown drip hoses going into them. And they're on one port on that timer, and the vegetables are on another port so that they get watered
good idea.
regularly.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
It's crucial if you use straw bale or any kind of small mass, because they need water so regularly.
Yep.
So, but yeah. And if you know where your bed's going to be, you can bury a line going out to it and then put your drip in out there.
We had the hose coming out, and I just connect and disconnect that as necessary, and if we mow, so that works really well. I also have other parts of the garden that's really raised, so they're about waist high, and put them in totes. And in part of the totes, we put in we fill that the bottom with water, and then on top of that we have dirt, and then it's just kind of like almost like a modified hydroponic type garden. So all we do is we fill that up at the bottom, and they for the plants that like a lot of water, that do really well in that environment, so that helps there as well. So
yeah, so there's a lot of ways to water. But yeah, Steve, have you been using the recycled black rubber hoses? Are those the ones you've been using?
Yes.
Yeah, I find that I am lucky to get 4 months out of one of those if I don't move it.
Okay.
But the black nylon ones, which are available in 25 and 50 foot lengths, I find they work really well. But if you're screwing and unscrewing the connectors on them constantly to change the hose, that twisting motion does wreck those too. So ergo the quick disconnect feature, where you buy those, there's a bunch of brands out there, but you put one piece on the end of your hose and the other piece goes on your soaker hose, and they just click together.
Where do you get the nylon ones? Do you get them at the big boxes or?
No, I either buy them online or I buy them from Swingers because he's in my neighborhood.
Okay.
But the hardware stores typically have them, and the big box stores have them. And I found that going with the more expensive one that had a 5-year or 3-year warranty made zero difference. They both last 3 years.
Oh, interesting.
But yeah, so there are also the old green plastic ones that you can find at garage sales sometimes. And those things seem to work forever until they get brittle. And then you can tell if they're brittle because if you pick it up and do this, it just splits. But they're hard to find now.
Are those the ones with the little pinholes in them?
Yeah, those are not as good, but if you're going to use those, instead of having the water spraying up, you flip them over so the water goes down. But the nylon weep hoses work pretty well.
All right.
As long as somebody doesn't weed whip them. So ask me how I know. Yeah, watering's to me the two biggies. You can talk vegetables into growing pretty much anywhere as long as you have sun and water.
Yeah.
You know, those are your two big keys. And when you don't have one or the other of those, you're toast. So.
Okay. Are there more questions for our master gardeners? All right. Well, if there are no more questions, I want to really thank you guys for helping us launch our first webinar. Thank you for attending and thank you for participating.
Thank you.
You.
Thank you.